welcome to Tea Time. We have a very, very special show for you this evening. Our guest is Trevor Loudon, who is an internationally acclaimed writer and speaker. And Trevor spoke to a large audience of New Jerseyans several weeks ago, and we taped it for you. And he spoke at the Wayne Public Library here in Wayne, New Jersey. And he spoke about his newest book, which is called Enemies Within. And that really describes an international phenomena of people from Muslim countries just fleeing their native land and coming in by the hundreds of thousands into Western Europe and the United States. And Trevor talks about what impact this influx has on Western culture. So it's an excellent, excellent episode. We think you really enjoy it. It's a very lively presentation and speaking, speaker. So we think it's something you'll really enjoy. So sit back, enjoy the program, and we'll check in with you later. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Thanks, Al. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Can you understand a southern accent? Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming tonight, folks, and it's good to see some familiar faces here. Who's heard me speak before? A few of you? Well, thank you. Reagan said you should always start with an amusing story. I was in Los Angeles recently, and I went up to a street food vendor and I bought some food. Gave the guy the money. He said to me, "Ah, you have an accent. Where are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm from New Zealand." He said, "Where's that?" And he said, "Well, it's down by Australia." He said, "Ah, where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes from." So that's Common Core geography for you folks. But people always ask me, they say, why, I've been coming to the States for nearly 5 years now, all over your country. And people always ask me, why does a New Zealander care about America? And I say there are two basic reasons. The first is gratitude. My country was saved from invasion in World War II, by invasion by the Japanese army, by the massive sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that's a very strong memory in my country, folks. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom should fail in the United States, if you lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which are in grave danger, the bad guys of this planet, I'm talking Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, and their Islamic allies, and they are allies, people, they will carve up this globe amongst themselves. Now, if you're an ally of America, Israel or Germany or Britain, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, you are freaking out right now because you see that the leadership of this country loves the bad guys of the world a lot more than they love the good guys. And that's causing big instability, folks. Your allies are looking at your country and they are wondering if it's worth being a friend of America. They look at your president. One of the first acts of office of Mr. Obama was to cancel the missile shield that was supposed to protect the Czech Republic and Poland from the Russians. Then they saw him abandon Georgia to the Russians. Then when there was a genuine rebellion in Iran against the mullahs, a rebellion that could have stopped the problems you have today, Obama did nothing and thousands of people were allowed to die. And then when the Communist Party of Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood took out your ally Mubarak, Obama cheered them on. And now they are looking at the Ukraine, folks, And we need to remember what Napoleon said about the Ukraine. Whoever controls the Ukraine controls Europe. Whoever controls Europe controls the world. These are big stakes we are playing for here, folks. The Ukrainians have a treaty signed in your Senate under Bill Clinton guaranteeing that country American protection from Russian military aggression. They gave away their nuclear arsenal in exchange for an American promise, folks. And now that they need it, where is it? So far, Obama has sent them a few $100 million of non-lethal aid and John Kerry. Who is John Kerry, folks? He's basically Jane Fonda with less testosterone. But to be fair to Mr. Obama, he did institute some sanctions on some rich Russians to terrify Mr. Putin into submission. I saw a rally in downtown Moscow not long ago, a pro-Putin rally. A woman held up a sign that I thought expressed their sentiments beautifully. The sign said, "Your pornography is harder than your sanctions." So you have a situation, folks. Well, this is not about a depression. You're Americans and you'll fight out of a depression. This is not even about losing some of your rights, because you're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in a position before where your commander-in-chief is alienating your allies, empowering your enemies, and gutting your military? Obama is driving your military down, your army back to pre-World War I levels, your navy back to pre-World War II levels. He's purging generals he doesn't like. He's driving thousands of good officers out of the military with the gay policy, women in combat, and rock-bottom morale and political correctness. He's cancelling weapon systems all over the place. He's blowing off military contractors with millions of years of experience in their ranks. And he wants to cut your nuclear arsenal down to 265 nukes and then down to 0. Because peace is breaking out all over, folks. Obama has abandoned Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength. And what happens to your peace, people, when you lose your strength? Do you think Putin would be trying to re-establish the old Soviet empire? Do you think China would be threatening Japan and the Philippines and even Australia and New Zealand? Do you think Iran would be threatening Israel? Do you think ISIS would be committing unimaginable atrocities in the Middle East if you had a Reagan in the White House today? But thousands of people are dying, folks, because this country has twice elected an anti-American president. And I want to digress a little bit, folks. I want to say something. Before World War II, there was one force in Germany that had the prestige and the numbers to stop Hitler, but they didn't do it. And that was the German churches. They could have stopped Hitler, they could have risen against him, but they decided to make their peace. They even put swastikas in their churches, people, to appease Herr Hitler. And because of their cowardice, 6 million Jews died, several million Germans died, hundreds of thousands of your boys died, and the world was plunged into unimaginable war. All because the German Christians, who had the ability to stop that tyrant, chose to take the easy way out. Well, in this country, folks, there are at least 50 million evangelical Christians. 20 million of them registered to vote, and 10 million actually do. They could have changed the government in both of your last 2 elections, but they chose to keep out of politics, not get our hands dirty. It's a dirty business. Let's not get involved. And because of that, folks, we have the situation now where thousands of Christians are being slaughtered every week in the Middle East. Churches are being burned. People are being crucified. The same in West Africa. Do you think that would be happening today if those Christians in this country had taken on their civic responsibilities and actually voted? And how many of them do you think understand their responsibility for what's happening to their Christian brethren in the Middle East and Africa? How many of them make the connection, do you think, folks? That's our job to do that, because we need to get them voting. So this is not about justice, depression, not about losing your rights. This is about the survival of your country, folks. Because if things go bad and China and Russia and Iran gang up on you, and they're all allied in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a political, military, economic alliance, you Google it. How many of your allies are going to come to your help, folks? Not many, I would venture. They're all going to try and make their own peace with the bad guys. So, you look at Obama, people say, look at the Iranian deal. The deal. Isn't a deal where both parties benefit? Isn't that a deal? So what have you got out of this deal with Iran, folks? You've got nothing, and they got everything, and you gave them a whole bunch of money that they can now use to terrorize other nations. Frank Gaffney estimated that the money you gave to Iran, if that was given to America on the same proportion, that would be $8 trillion. What do you think they're going to do with that, people? What do you think? And you got nothing. You didn't even get your 4 hostages back. John Kerry has betrayed you just like he did after the Vietnam War. Kerry and Obama have betrayed this country and brought an almost certain war to the Middle East and maybe further afield. You think about it, folks. If Israel tries to attack Iran now, and they're going to have to, which side is America going to be on? If you want to know what Obama's going to do tomorrow, you read the Communist Party newspaper today, because that's where he takes his cue, folks. They have been talking about an Iranian alliance, an Iranian nuclear deal for some time. And the next step is going to be an American-Iranian military alliance against ISIS. And think about it. Why did Obama let ISIS get so out of hand when he was told about it 2 years ago? Because they are so damn crazy, they make the Iranians look moderate, and America will accept a military alliance with Iran if it means crushing ISIS. That's what this is about, people. People say Obama is just stupid, out of his depth, doesn't understand foreign policy. If he was just out of his depth, folks, would he not make some mistakes in your favour once in a while? I think you've got to realise Obama was mentored by pro-Soviet communists, folks. Frank Marshall Davis, Alice Palmer, a whole bunch of others in Chicago. I think the most significant thing your president said in his entire first term of office, when he was caught off mic in South Korea with then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, thought no one was listening. Yes, Mr. Medvedev, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Yes, said Medvedev, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. What more of a warning do you need, guys? How much more blatant does it need to get? Now, my books, I have both books up there. The first book is Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. Nearly 700 pages on Obama's pro-Soviet, communist, anti-Israeli ties. And I'll tell you straight, people, that is a very, very heavy book. And I got really, really sick of lugging it around the country, I can tell you. And I vowed and declared that my next book would be smaller and lighter. And this one is The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists, and Progressives in the US Congress. And guess what, guys? It's bigger. Because those commies just kept on coming, folks. The deeper I dug, the more I found. Now, the book is really about the two big secrets of modern communism. The first secret, I think they borrowed from the devil, because we all know that the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. So what have the communists been telling you in the last 20 years, folks? Pretty much the same thing, right? Well, you can trust them just as much. They have very similar reasons for lying to you, folks. Now, the second big secret of modern communism, which is hardly ever discussed in the thousands of books on the subject, it is the ability of a tiny Marxist party, maybe a few hundred comrades strong. It is their ability to influence and even control the legislative process in their country. In other words, to write the laws. So what I'm saying is, less than 20,000 card-carrying communists in your country are right now writing the legislation that is controlling the lives of more than 320 million Americans. A little bit far-fetched, is it not? Well, the mechanism they mainly use is control of the labour unions, organised labour. Now, you were very lucky in America for a long time because your AFL-CIO was run by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. But in 1995, people, everything changed. That was the year that Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist party, Gramsciist communists, they believe in revolution through infiltration. That was the year they took over the AFL-CIO. They kicked out Lane Kirkland, they put their member John Sweeney in as president, and now their protege Richard Trumka runs it for them. They took over every major labour union, AFSCME, SEIU, NEA, United Auto Workers, you name it, they run it. And then they purged the Democratic Party. They got rid of the centrists, the moderates, the Southern Dixiecrats. Joe Lieberman from Connecticut was one of the last to go, far too pro-Israel for them. And now they own that party, folks. 20,000 communists control the unions control the Democratic Party. And they are writing its policies, folks. If you want to know what the Democrats are going to do tomorrow, as I said, read the Communist Party paper today. Card check, cap and trade, green jobs, normalisation of relations with Cuba, the ban on the Keystone Pipeline, the anti-fracking movement, Common Core, socialisation of student loans, Obamacare, the Iran deal. All of those were communist policies that have now become democratic policy through the union movement. And there's one that I think is one of the worst of all, the most dangerous, It's gone off the radar a tiny little bit. That is comprehensive immigration reform, otherwise known as amnesty. Now you have Republicans, people, and I put that in inverted commas, like Lindsey Graham and Jeb Bush and John McCain, who tell you that amnesty will be good for the GOP. Because if you give 8 or 10 or 12 or 20 million, who knows how many there are, if you give them all citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to be so grateful, they'll all become staunch conservatives, right?
Sure.
Delusional, isn't it? We know that the Latinos, who are the bulk of the illegals, are often very socially conservative Christian people, but they vote 80% at least Democrat. Now maybe they will change in 10, 20, 30 years, maybe. But we have one election cycle left to save this country, folks. It ain't going to happen in that time. So why do these Republicans tell you this garbage, folks? Could it be connected in any way to the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce has spent more than $1.7 billion promoting amnesty in the last 10 years? What do you think the Chamber wants out of it, guys? Is it hard to guess? Cheap labour. Because the Chamber is all about profit. And I believe in profit, but I also believe in ethical business. And ethical business is when you make a profit and you pay your costs. Now the Chamber wants the profits of cheap labour, but the costs are going to be the destruction of your border integrity, the massive endangerment of your national security, the bankruptcy of communities all over your country, and the lessening of respect for the rule of law in your land. The Chamber's going to take the profits, people. Who is going to pay the costs? You are. Is that ethical business? Maybe a good time to change the tape, sir, or do you want me to go on a little bit longer? Well, the real driver of this is the communist movement. This started out in California in the 1950s with a Communist Party member named Bert Corona. Big-time Democrat as well. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs, the first organised efforts to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up, mainly with Saul Alinsky money, a whole bunch of support groups for illegals in the southern border states and Southern California. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, get them work in the factories and farms, get them citizenship and voting. The voting was the goal. Now, Corona trained a whole bunch of acolytes to carry on his work for him. 3 of them are very prominent today in Southern California, and they have transformed that state. Any California refugees here tonight? Well, okay, nobody's going to challenge me then. Okay, the first one was Antonio Villagrosa, until recently the mayor of Los Angeles. A hardcore Marxist. He used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He turned Los Angeles into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and the illegals flooded in the hundreds of thousands. Changed the entire demographics of the state. Second member of this group, a Communist Party supporter named Gil Cedillo, until recently the Democratic head of the California State Senate. He is the man who got the DREAM Act pushed through in California about 3 years ago, which gave all sorts of so-called rights to the children of what they call undocumented workers. Third member of this group, Maria Elena Durazzo, a hardcore Marxist, until recently the head of the California AFL-CIO. She is behind the massive union-driven and union paid for Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that have added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 15 years. Almost all of them Democrats.
Wow, that was some speech, wasn't it, by Trevor Loudon, who is the author of Enemies Within Part 1 and 2. We may have another episode because Trevor spoke beyond, the end of this program, so we hope to bring that to you in the future. But in the meantime, lots to think about. We don't like to tell people what to think, but we do like to offer a different perspective, and we think that Trevor Loudon certainly did this evening, from, the recent trade deal with Iran to the amnesty that is supported by members of both parties in the Congress. It really gives us a lot to think about, like, who's really running the show here? Are there two parties, or is there just only one and we're not in it? So we like to bring you alternative point of view. Hopefully you have something new to think about, and we look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, please check our website. It is www.njtpartycoalition.org, and I'm Laura, and thank you for joining us. Thank you.